Recording. So, welcome to our podcast, The Legacy at HT Odum and Systems Ecology, where we explore the monumental impact of scientists on our understanding of ecological systems. Today, we're very delighted to spotlight Dr. Bill Mitsch, a pioneering force in ecological engineering and wetland science. As the author of the first book in the field on ecological engineering and the founder of the Journal of Ecological Engineering, he's been instrumental in developing wetland ecology and ecological engineering. His work at the Olentangy River Wetland Research Park at the Ohio State University campus in Columbus has earned him global recognition, notably becoming a Ramsar wetland of international importance. A recipient of the prestigious Stockholm Water Prize, Dr. Mitsch's contributions continue to influence wetland science worldwide, from nutrient removal strategies to combating climate change. Currently, Bill is Professor Emeritus at the School of Environment and Natural Resources at the Ohio State University in Columbus, and Professor Emeritus of the Water School at the Florida Gulf Coast University. Welcome, Bill. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Dave.
And of course, I have my co-host here with me, Mark Brown at the University of Florida.
Hey, Bill.
Hey,
Good to
Mark.
see you. Nice to see
You're in Gainesville right now?
you. I am.
That was a favorite town of mine.
That's where, we kind of like to start is kind of like you hear a little bit about your backstory, kind of pre-meeting Odum and what was going on in your life, maybe back in the 1960s when you're thinking about grad school, or what kind of drew you to systems ecology, and you eventually ended up in Gainesville. So maybe, I don't know if you could go back and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, the one advantage I had when I was going to grad school is I got an engineering degree, bachelor's, and you'd think, well, what good is that? And if you're going to try to do ecology, and it turns out it was the right combination of me knowing the engineering and me learning the ecology, and that served me very well. But let's see, I'm going to put the dates in if I can, if I remember. I didn't go to a university right after my bachelor's. My bachelor's was in 1969 from the University of Notre Dame. Anybody like the Irish?
Oh, yeah.
And, I felt that was a great basic program. And I really felt empowered after getting a degree at Notre Dame. But I knew there was something missing. And I do remember taking, this is a little side story, taking physical chemistry. You guys know what that is? It's thermodynamics, and another word. And I remember them telling us about the second law of thermodynamics. And it was like and described by engineers, it was something that was very sad because everything degrades, and that's where they stop. And I almost wanted to raise my hand in the class and say, well, can't we fix that? How do we deal with the continual dissipation of energy? Are we all going to die? In other words, what I'm saying is you take an engineering thermodynamics book and they don't describe life. They have no clue about it, or nobody told them, or whatever. So that was what really got me going when I came to Gainesville and discovered there was a force of, what do we call it? Dissipation of entropy. And it was life. It's not the only example, of course. We've described tornadoes and hurricanes as having their own life too, but really that led the scales to fall off my eyes, if you can imagine scales falling off your eye. But it really did complete the circle. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Especially for somebody that had the training that I had in engineering. But because I was getting a degree in at Notre Dame in mechanical engineering, and I did not want to go to Vietnam, I decided to get a real job. And the mechanical engineering degree allowed me to work with energy. Now, that's another connection with Odum that was bound to happen for me. In other words, first of all, the second law of thermodynamics is an issue. Now, I actually had a career where I worked for two of the biggest utilities in the country. One was American Electric Power, and I worked for the Ohio Power subsidy of AEP. AEP it was at the time the biggest electric utility in the country. I'm not sure if it's the biggest in the world, but it certainly was the biggest one in the country because they had some massive, uh, they were massive managers of fossil fuels, especially coal. You know, they centered themselves in the Ohio River Valley. And so I worked with the AEP for about 6 months, 8 months, maybe a full year. And I enjoyed it. It was interesting stuff. And I remember distinctly that my first task of big proportion was to organize the cleaning of a electrostatic precipitator. You guys know what those are?
Yeah.
Kind of remember that a little bit.
Yeah. And so anyhow, one force moved me to Chicago, and that would have been my wife to be, Ruth Marie, who was in Chicago suburbs getting her bachelor's degree at Rosary College. You guys ever remember that place or heard of it?
I don't know
No.
that one.
Well, they changed their name because they thought nobody would go to a school named Rosary. Uh, but that's where Ruth Marie is. So as soon as I got my lottery number, it was 362. That is, for me to go into battle, it would have had to be a nuclear holocaust. I don't know if you remember it. The higher the number you got in a 1 to 365, the less likely you're going to be brought into the
Mm.
what did they call that? It was a
The Vietnam War.
no, but it was the selecting process.
The draft.
Yeah, yeah. So all of a sudden, when I got this draft number, I said, "Oh, I can quit working in Ohio," because one of the reasons I was working in Ohio because the advice that I got from many sources is, Bill, you're going to get an energy. You have an energy degree, but that's not enough. You got to do something in your draft. What was it? Draft board. You know, they have to know what year. So I went to Ohio Power, and of course the draft board knew what Ohio Power was. So indeed, I did get a waiver. I did take uh, the health thing they do. They took an early morning bus up to Pittsburgh. So, you know, I was vulnerable, but I because I was an engineer on an important industry, you know, power is the most important energy that we have. It all worked out, and I was in Ohio, but Ruth Mary was in Chicago. So I said, well, I'll settle this. So I retired from my job in Ohio at about 9 or 10 months time and jumped in my Mustang and drove off to see Ruth Marie and never returned. So that's the beginning of it all. Didn't know
So
much.
that took you to Chicago, and then you started thinking about graduate school after you left the power company?
Well, I was interested in the environment from the beginning, and I was taking courses at little universities like Chicago State or someplace like that. So I was interested in, I don't know where I caught the bug for being interested in environment, except I was seeing firsthand what electric utilities are doing, and they're trashing the planet. So yeah, I got an interest from the job I was in, but I didn't know how much I was interested in academics until I tried a course or two in Chicago. And then I remember distinctly I got a job at Commonwealth Edison. the second biggest utility. And I remember they said, "What took you so long?" Because I had applied for a position there a month or two before, or sorry, a week, almost a year or two before uh, they actually hired me. And I remember they said, "Boy, we kept your folder here in my drawer a long time, Bill. About time you showed up." So anyhow, and Chicago was just an eye opener, to be in a city. And honestly, uh, truthfully, what really sprung me loose to be want a career in environment was the first Earth Day. Absolutely no question. Uh, because then I was working in downtown Chicago. It's called the Loop. My office was with Commonwealth Edison in the Loop, and I remember, it was nice because you could go to very nice restaurants for lunch in the downtown area. But I was walking around. I don't know with a friend or alone downtown in early April. I guess it would be 1970. Uh, and there was a big fuss over at the uh, now I'm trying to remember the name of the, well, there was a big fuss at the uh, city county building. I can't remember the name. I guess it was named after what's the name? The
Oh, the mayor
yeah,
Daily.
Daily, yeah, Daily Plaza. Thank you. Guys are gonna bail me out all day. Uh, Daily Plaza, and there was this big crowd, and I went up to somebody and I said, "Well, what's going on here?" He says, "Well, don't you know this is the first Earth Day?" And I said, "No, I didn't know. What are you guys doing?" "Well, we're going to try to clean up Chicago and put some of these companies out of business." And I said, "Oh, well, like who?" And I said, "Well, how about," and I make it colorful by saying, they said, "Commonwealth Edison, we're going to put them on an island." But they really did. They were serious, and I remember now that there was the time when the companies, the big companies, you say, "Oh, they're polluting and nobody can say," they were scared to death of what was going on. And I remember Commonwealth Edison had a vice president designated to go to jail for ecological environmental sins. And I thought, what? Go to jail? So that meant they were taking it seriously. So I went back to the office and said, "Do you guys know what we're doing to clean up the earth," or something like that?
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, yeah, we're starting an environmental affairs department." And I remember that being a double entendres kind of, but environmental affairs department. And I said, "Oh, who's starting it?" And they had a biologist, they had a geologist, and they had an engineer. And I said, "I'd like to join that department." And I found out the names of the people who were already in that department. And I lobbied with all three of them, and they were very nice people, and darned if I didn't get in that department. So that's where I got into the environmental stuff. It's a long story.
That's a good testament to Earth, the importance of Earth Days. It's coming up obviously in April again. I guess
Right.
this will be the 54th anniversary. So 1970 was the first one.
Yeah. So if you guys want me to give an Earth Day talk, I'm really good at that because I gave last year for Bob Nairn. You guys know him, right?
Oh yeah, Bob. Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
And he invited me to do a Zoom talk, two Zoom talks that were played at the Norman campus, and that was fun. It was a real big crowd that showed up.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. We're trying to do something on our campus. I'll let
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So 1970. So you probably stayed at Commonwealth Edison for a bit longer. And when did you show up in Gainesville, or what was that?
Well, I would have showed up for the 91, 92. So no, I was moving around a lot. So it was 91, 92. I showed up for that semester. Uh,
90 or 70?
Well, 70, sorry, you're right. 70, 71 semester.
So how did you hear about so Odum had moved from UNC to Florida about 1970,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah, it was the same time to get there. I didn't really know anything. I recognized his name for somehow, but you know, since I was in engineering, I wouldn't necessarily know Odom.
Hmm.
And but I did. So I went down there and I hadn't chosen a major professor, so they assigned somebody that I think they assigned the chair of the department to me or somebody.
So did you go into environmental engineering when you came to Florida, or was it civil or
Yeah,
mechanical?
no, it was environmental engineering
Okay.
sciences. Yes, from the beginning.
Mhm.
And so I was in the department, and I was excited to be in the department. Uh, but first got a sense of, wait a minute, these guys uh, aren't really doing what I would like to do, but it's nice that I'm in the department. So I'll tell you what swung me over to Odum. Some of you guys remember Ariel Lugo.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Ariel Lugo in the summer of 72, did I get that right? Year, uh, uh, was a co-instructor of a course called, poorly named, Man and Environment. And University of Florida was a supporter of that, and they announced this course as the following way, or at least the sound of it. Uh, Apply here, and maybe you will be able to go free to Europe. And that's exactly what it was. And all the other graduate students, I wasn't committed to a thesis title. In fact, I might have been in the non-thesis option. I don't remember, but I wasn't tied down to a thesis after 2 semesters. And so I just filled out the form, and damned if I didn't get it. And so it was I think I'm going to say 2 months in Leiden, Holland. Any guys ever been there? Cool little town. And it's also, let's see, the Leiden jar was invented there, and that was the first battery or something like that. So it was a very prestigious university that this was going to be taught, and it involved University of Florida people, and Lugo was the leader of that group. Uh, and then 2 universities in Holland. One was a social science institute, and one was I can't remember what they did. So yeah, that was awesome, and the course itself lasted, I'm going to say, 6 to 8 weeks. I could be wrong on that, but and we're living over in Holland, and we just loved it. But you know what we did, which really nailed it? Um, I don't know. I'm just going to drop names, and you guys tell me whether they know him or not. But Bob Hart, Hart, was a student of who was he a student of? Jack Ewell, I believe. I know you guys remember Jack Ewell, but
Yeah.
remember
Remember Jack.
he had a grad student named Bob Hart, and Bob and his wife were both over in, or at least Bob was signed up for this short course from agronomy, I think. So we got to know them, and we would spend evenings. How shall I say this and not get in trouble? Uh, you know, we had a few beers, put it that way, but we were very, very much talking about this professor named Odum. I said, "Holy shit! This is it. This is what I want to do. It's exactly it." And so I had a great time meeting with Bob Hart, and then his wife, of course, knew what we were doing, and Ruth Marie, my wife, was in the discussions too. And it was just a turning point in my life in those fancy buildings that we were in next. As I recall, it was just very close to the train station in Leiden.
Mm.
And so that made it even better location. So anyhow, it
So
was,
had Bob Hart had a course with HD, or how was it that
I
Bob
don't,
Hart?
I think he was just a Jack Yule student who heard about Odum
Um,
from Jack. I could be wrong. He could, because the course itself had Ariel Lugo too. You remember both of those guys came at the same time from North Carolina, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I think the arts and science people hired those two because the engineering hired Odum, and they said we're not going to let them do that. So that's why we had three legitimate Odumites, including Odum himself, who came down on the 1970 year. I think it's right. Is that right?
70, 71. It was right at the cusp of those 70, 71.
Right, but they all three came at approximately the same time.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So anyhow, obviously, when I went back to take class, I know my advisor by then was Wayne Huber,
Ah,
back in
okay.
that department, and that's because, you know, they do modeling, and there was some reason they thought I did modeling, and so when I went back, I said, I asked Hubert, I see that Odum's teaching his class. Can I take it? And he said, sure, no problem. It's modeling. It applies. So he was pretty favorable, positive on everything. What he didn't know was he was, that I was bailing out of his program and probably going to go to Odum sooner or later. And that's what happened. I'm not saying it happened right away, but boy, when I started taking that class, I think it would have been let me get the fall of 71 or something like that. I'm trying to get the dates right and I'm getting them all wrong. But yeah, would that be right? It would be fall.
Yep.
And
So was Huber
70,
the chair of the department at that time?
what's who?
Did he became the chair? Is that right, Mark?
Who?
Huber? Did he ever become the
No,
chair of the?
he never
Oh,
was chair. He was
I think
head
he
chair at
might
that.
have, but not when we were there.
Okay.
He never did. Ed Pyatt was the chair at that time.
Yeah. So I did have Ed Pyatt as sort of an advisor too, along with Huber. They were a kind of a team anyhow. So that's how I got into the Odum world. And so Ariel Lugo, oh my God, every one of his lectures, he's throwing up an energy diagram and saying, you need to memorize this for the next class. And he would just wired Odum. I don't know how, and I can't, and that was justified. So anyhow, that's pretty much a story. I wrote some notes.
Based on the we got to interview Ariel last 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I had never met him. Mark obviously had known him for a long time, but it was amazing to me how much time he had spent with Odum in Puerto Rico, and in the '60s doing
Yes.
the tropical rainforest project. So he was really, immersed in field ecology with Odum before he even went on to get his degree with them. So
Yeah, I think
yeah,
you're right. And
yeah.
he was wired to Odum. But I don't know all the details of his career, but I do know that he was a good teacher, and he also loved basketball. We were playing. I don't know who we were playing, but in Holland we had a team that was not too bad. So anyhow, that's how it all got started, and how I got in Odum's class. And then, I'm not his student yet. That he had a class project. Everybody had to do a model, right? It's probably doing those up in heaven now. But the class projects he took great interest in what the students were doing, but But I don't know, Mark, if you remember, the graduate students had that one classroom on the second floor of Black Hall.
Sure.
And they had the Miniac, was it a Miniac
Well, there was many.
analog computer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Analog.
So I just remember, well, I'll try this thing. Seems pretty simple. So I was spending a lot of time in that room, even though I wasn't supposed to be there. Well, it's not that I wasn't supposed to be there, but nobody else was there. And running my water hyacinth model. I decided that I wanted to, because we had a study in Lake Alice that was going to be part of my master's thesis if I ever got focused on it. But so I did a little model of water hyacinths, and I distinctly remember we started naming people who were managing Lake Alice, and we named him the guy who was manually harvesting the,
The hyacinth.
hyacinths. I think we called him K10.
For coefficient.
Yes,
A coefficient, yeah.
yes, and then anybody else that did anything. So anyhow, that ended up being part of my dissertation, a big giant model of Lake Alice. And then when and I was in the right place at the right time, I think, Mark, except because there was this talk of a project that was going to revolutionize the way we deal with wetlands, and especially how they will clean up water, and cypress domes were focus of that thing. So that was happening right after I latched on to Odum, and Kathy Yule was turned out to be a great advisor for me. She ended up being on my committee most of the time because HT traveled so much. So, and now, of course, that was the NSF, and who was the other?
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller. Yeah, Rockefeller NSF, right? And it was a big grant, and I was the first student on that project. I think I was also one of the first graduate students at the Center for Wetlands when we moved into that building.
It's a Phelps lab.
The what?
Phelps lab, where they have the center,
Yeah.
the actual building.
Yeah, it's still there, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the Center, Odum Center for Wetlands, right?
That's correct. So this is your first introduction to wetlands. It sounds like maybe it was Lake Alice and the Hyacinth project, and
Yes.
So you finished that up, and then the Cypress Dome project is gonna just transition to your PhD, or how'd that work?
Yeah, I just molded those two in. I was doing modeling on both, so it was kind of like different time scales and so on, but it fit well into a good dissertation. It wasn't a master's thesis anymore. And so, yeah, and then I graduated in 70. Who's my timekeeper?
I'm I'm curious about the modeling. There's always kind of a little bit of a tension between the field ecologist and the modeling, and I think Odum obviously straddled those two areas. And I'm curious to hear your experience with the field component and how.
Oh, I loved getting in the field. Do you remember Lake Alice? I don't remember.
Oh yeah, yeah, full of alligators when I was there.
Yeah, and full of water hyacinths. And yes, the gators were there too. You never saw a gator man, right? That's another side story. I better not.
Don't know that story.
Yeah.
He was crazy. They said he was crazy from being in Vietnam too long.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Bill, can you remember that first course with HT, and the excitement that you felt, or anything about it?
Oh my God. It was like every lecture was just, what? He said, what? And it was just outstanding. It was a good move for me.
Mhm.
Do you remember him explaining the second law to you in a different way than you'd learned it from the engineers?
Well, yeah, I mean, luckily I learned how to describe entropy and the second law and all that kind of stuff. So Odum knew a lot of thermodynamics. We shouldn't cut him short on that. But the engineers knew nothing about life
Right.
or anything that fights entropy. You know, not life is just one example. But yeah, and it was like he said, "What?" So he was the real deal when I took his class, and it didn't take long for me to ask if he would be my advisor.
So you must have loved the fact that you wanted to do so much modeling. I mean, I remember your dissertation on the library bookshelf being 2 volumes. Am I is that correct?
Yes, it
It's
was.
not 2 volumes. It was very large. A
Yes.
lot of data output, I'm guessing.
The joke was that somebody, for my dissertation, to improve it, they should weigh it. And actually, it was something like 500 pages. Remember, you put pictures on one side and the legend on the other, so it was a big waste of space.
Yeah.
But I think Odum had it in his bookshelf for a while.
Oh, he had the whole, yeah. His office was lined with all the dissertations. So we'll get back on track. So you finished up in 74 and
70,
then
75.
75. And then, um, like, what was it like with Odom in the modeling? Like, how was he interacting with
Well,
you on the
that's what
modeling? Was he
that's
in the
what
Miniac room with you, or?
yes, that's the story. I'm at the Miniac running a model, and he happened to walk in, and he noticed that none of his students were doing modeling. I think so. He came over. What are you doing here? And I said, I'm doing a water hyacinth model of for the class that you're teaching me. You know, because you had to have a project. So he sat down in a chair, and we had just a wonderful session talking about water hyacinths. I can only imagine what he thought of the idea, but yeah, it was perfect timing. You know, if you just be in the right place at the right time, sometimes is the most important thing.
So was he in there like turning the dials with you and
Oh yeah,
changing the
yeah,
coefficients and?
yep. K values. I said K10. That's the guy who's harvesting.
Yeah.
Maybe that's that story.
Uh-huh. So so 75 you leave University of Florida. So what happens then? Do you go get your first
I got,
academic job? Do you go back to the Midwest? Is that
it's
right?
funny because uh, you know, Odom, of course, is supporting, but I had I had some good friends, or I should say, good uh, teachers, professors on my committee. Pat Brzonik was one,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember he gave me a very nice reference to one of his former students, who was a chemist at IIT in the environmental science engineering department there. IIT was based in Chicago. And you know, I got a very nice offer from them to go up to Chicago. Well, I just come down from Chicago. What am I doing? So we went back to Chicago, and I had 4 very nice years at IIT, and it was fun again. But I sometimes moved too much. I went to 4 different universities as professor, and IIT was the first. And I think that was after 4 years. And then I went to Louisville, then Ohio State, and then FGCU.
So at IIT, do you continue with the modeling, or are you doing more field
Yes,
ecology, or are you doing kind of the combination of both?
I have claimed, and nobody's said it, I'm wrong, that I taught the first ecological engineering course because it would have been in woo, what would that be, 76 maybe?
Mm-hmm.
And I taught modeling there too. And then I didn't teach a wetland course at first. I was mostly teaching, uh, you know, ecology with a little twist of engineering, or engineering with a little twist of ecology.
So what's going on with it in terms of like ecological engineering then? So like constructed wetlands, actually making, new wetlands and turning them in, as a
I,
design for
I'm
wastewater
sure
treatment.
yeah, I'm sure there were some case studies that I taught in that class.
Mhm.
I just don't remember if that was very well as far. Yeah, I had a great case study to talk about in the class. It was the cypress swamp study in Florida.
Mhm.
So I know I had
That's
some slides on that.
right. So that's where, just for everybody else to understand, so the Cypress Wetland Project, they took existing cypress domes around the Gainesville area and applied treated sewage to them that came from the city
Right,
wastewater treatment plant.
right. And it was near Gainesville, just north of Gainesville. We're doing that. And what was interesting is Odum, for funding reasons, he occasionally got in there and did things for strange reasons. But Odum decided that our control site was going to be, Mark, do you remember?
Austin Carey.
What?
Austin Carey?
No, well, that was one control site, but you're right. But the control site in Florida was what? Help me! It's the swamp down here in Florida,
Corkscrew?
Corkscrew. Yeah. And when I drove down to Corkscrew Swamp the first time and saw that wetland, I said, this, somebody said, well, what do you think about this? I said, this is going to be my career. Absolutely nailed it right there, that I was going to be a wetland scientist. And yeah, if we want to do modeling and creating wetlands, that's great too. So
What
anyhow,
was it about the corkscrew swamp? Kind of maybe describe what you were seeing then.
I
What
was
was
in
so amazing
I was,
about it?
I was in a cathedral, and I started calling it that. I think maybe some other people had already come up with that idea, but it's an ecological cathedral. Mother Nature can't do any better than this. So I felt that all those big wetlands down in South Florida, they were just magnificent, and that's what swung me over to a career of uh, of wetlands being a little more important. But
So then it's so IIT, you're teaching the courses on how to use wastewater to reinvigorate, support
yeah,
existing wetlands,
yeah,
building new wetlands,
yeah,
restoring wetlands.
so I didn't, we didn't have any particular site in Chicagoland where we could build a wetland. Although we did think about it, and I taught I'm the only one that ever run oxygen diurnals in the city of Chicago, and doing it at night when all the criminals are out there. We had to have police protection for our diurnal.
This is on Lake Michigan or one of the rivers.
Uh, one of the tributaries that's up by the zoo there somewhere.
Mm.
It wasn't a big stream or lake or anything. It was just a artificial lake very close to Lake Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
yeah,
was it receiving the wastewater effluent,
oh
treated
no, no,
effluent?
no.
No, it was,
We just wanted to get some numbers on a diurnals. But I do remember I had to get police. I knew we'd be there at night, and I know Chicago's crime record, so the police agreed to provide protection for a diurnal.
and so so were you teaching systems ecology? Did you ever teach systems ecology? Did you
Yeah,
do that at Illinois or
no, at Illinois, the name of the course was Ecological Engineering and Systems Ecology.
so you combine them?
Yes.
Hmm.
So, so
And
that's
then so you're there to about 1980, it sounds like, if you're there for 4 years.
yep.
And you said Louisville? University
Louisville,
of Louisville, Kentucky.
yeah.
Stepping
Yeah,
to the south again.
yes, and it was very nice to be back in the Ohio Valley. But it meant leaving the Great Lakes. So, I covered the Midwest pretty well in my career. So,
What was the attraction for Louisville? What was
uh,
Did they have an
well,
environmental engineering sciences department, kind of like the
no, but
Florida school, or?
it was more that the IIT director, the guy who used to be Pat Berzonic's student, decided he wanted me to teach wastewater, period, the wastewater course, which they considered to be their central course to that department. I held out for 4 years before I was told that you have to teach this, Bill. And so I just said, okay, I'll do it, but I just didn't enjoy it at all. And so that's led me to look for some job somewhere else.
Oh,
And then,
so you're in Louisville. Then you had you hosted or helped, or did you help organize that meeting with There's a
oh,
nice
yeah.
recording of Odum. We got to actually have a video of him being interviewed by
Yes.
probably one of your colleagues there, whose name I don't know, but
Oh, yeah, that was the president. That involved the president of the University of Louisville wanting to be interviewed himself. So I don't know how that worked, but he thought he was the next coming of God because, well, he had a systems book. Do you remember that at all?
I do, and I'm trying, Living Systems was the name of the book, and
Yes.
his name is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't.
I mean, he was smart, but he was a bureaucrat, and if he wanted to teach the course or get so that video still exists. Who was interviewing him, or was he interviewing?
he was interviewing Dr. Odum.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Now, if I remember correctly, Prigogine was at that meeting.
Yes, Prigogine was there.
And how was the meeting with Prigogine and Odum? Do you remember it?
Yes, and there was a few comments going back and forth, but
Was
I
his
don't
name
remember.
Jim Miller?
Jim Miller.
Yeah, Jim Miller. Yes. So what I've got is, if you want me to go 3 feet behind me, I've got that book that we published from those hot shots. We put them all, Prigogine, and I don't know if we did Miller or not, but anyhow, we had and then Jorgensen was in the book. I was just a new kid at then. But I could edit the book if nothing else.
The great thing about that book that I remember is Odum's chapter is his maximum power model with the three different systems competing. One's simple, one's medium complexity, and the other is more complex. And he makes the point that maximum power also seems to correlate with mathematical power and complexity.
No, that was that meeting in Louisville did more to develop systems ecology and ecological modeling and ecological economics and ecological engineering of any meeting that ever was held. That's where we developed all those fields.
So is that when the journal Ecological Modeling started, or it had
Oh
been
no,
around before that?
That already existed because Jorgensen developed it before we had that meeting. He was doing principally modeling.
Right.
And it occurred to us that, with Elsevier's blessing, of course, they want to make money, that we were onto something here with a systems approach, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. There were 5 or 6 or 7 journals with ecological fill in the blank. And I don't know how many there are now.
Yes, phenomenal growth.
But that meeting was absolutely key to getting the right people together. Well, how did I know who the right people were? Well, by then, you knew.
Great. So, so then you make it to Columbus, to Ohio State. That
Yeah.
must be early 80s, mid 80s.
1980. And that's where I am now. No, that's not where I am now. I think
You were there for a long time. I know that.
they, sometimes I get really screwed up on where I am. No, I'm down in Florida, but we moved to Columbus and I had a 27-year run building wetlands, and I remember distinctly thinking, moving to Ohio, wait a minute, that they lost 90% of their wetlands, Bill, you idiot. Why are you going to there? And I said, well, that's the reason I'm going there. We're gonna have a center that focuses on building and restoring wetlands more than because it's needed there. And that turned out to be true.
So there you're in the natural resources, School of Natural Resources. Did that exist then?
Cool. Now, School of Environment, yes, it was called School of Natural Resources. You're right, first. That was the name, but we were able, after about 5 or 6 years of hounding the administrators, that we wanted to get the word environment in the title of the department. It wasn't, natural resources was too much narrowing things down, you know. And so we finally did get it renamed Environment and Natural Resources, School of. So that's the school you saw that I sent you, the one I got an appointment in. Bill.
Yeah, you sent us these great pictures, these photos from the past. I was going to pull those up and see if we could identify people. Can you see the screen pretty well if I share the screen? Let's see. Hold on, I haven't shared it yet. We haven't done this before.
Yeah, I can see
There
it.
we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
I think let's see. That's just fine. So I think you're there in the middle. Is that right? Is that you?
Yep.
And there's Dr. Odum.
Yep.
And this looks like, I'm going to guess. This looks like Jim Zucchetto. Is that
Yes.
Jim?
Yep.
And I'm going to guess that's Charlie Hall, but I don't.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
Yep. It's going well.
This guy I don't know.
Hank
Oh.
McKellar.
Who is that?
Hank McKellar.
Hank
Yes.
McKellar. Oh, know the name. Never know. And then this is, he looks
Wade.
familiar.
Wade.
Wade, was it Wade Smith or Wade?
Wade Smith, that's right. Yep. Wade
Oh, that's
Smith.
the one that Walter Boynton was talking about quite a bit.
Yeah.
I believe.
Wade was always the king of the room, graduate room. I don't know who anointed him, but
I'm sure and then this lady here in the front, who's this?
oh,
Can't remember her name. She went out to California and was quite active in politics in California.
Oh,
yeah.
and this one, this person I don't know, in front of Dr. Odum.
From Odum, maybe not.
Yeah, he was, and he went out to EPA in Corvallis, and
Oh, this guy, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then we thought, what are you going to Corvallis for? There's no wetlands out there. And it turns out he was a hard worker, and now EPA has their main wetland protection office in Corvallis.
I think I've talked to him on the phone before. He seemed like he worked a lot with Dan Campbell later on.
Scott Leibowitz.
Leibowitz.
Scott Leibowitz. And next to him, Sandra Brown.
That's Sandra Brown. Okay.
And then behind Sandra is Bob Costanza.
Bob Costanza. Yeah. And then somebody got cut off there. I can't see them.
Yeah.
And then there's this other, photo now. This looks like this is
it's
a little later.
It's at
HT's home.
Yeah.
It looks familiar. Yeah. It looks like his living room there with Betty in Gainesville.
Yeah, that's Gainesville.
There's Dr. Odum. There's Bill. I don't know who's standing next to you, Bill.
I think that's Pat.
Pat. That's
Is that Pat? Oh yeah. And then this person, I don't know this guy here.
Who was it? He went to he moved from Florida and went to EPA in uh, Oregon.
Oh,
Wow.
another person moved to Oregon. Huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he was a water quality modeler.
yeah.
Yeah.
He was fighting the fight as well as I've ever seen it, somebody do it in South Florida and trying to get the South Florida Water Management to do the right thing. But
Yeah.
he was beaten up severely in that.
And then we have a lady here in front of
I
Pat,
can't remember her name.
and then
Yeah.
another lady in front of Dr. Odum.
Oh.
She's she went up to New York in
Oh,
New York,
yeah,
upstate.
yeah, she was at University Ithaca, I think.
yeah. I think I've actually
Oh yeah, yeah.
like Lisa. Is that Lisa Elizabeth? Beth? No, I'm throwing out names. Sorry.
Okay,
We
All
got
right, we'll go to people we know. There's Costanza again. Looks
yeah,
like, and this is Walter down here. Is this Walter Boynton?
yeah,
And Mark, is this you?
Yes.
that's me.
Mark Brown. So what year's this is like 1980 or so?
Oh,
Oh,
it was a AIBS meeting in Gainesville, I think.
hmm,
Doesn't that sound right, Mark?
it's possible. I don't, just looking at the people, I would say it's around 80, 81, something like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Um, and the woman next to Costanza is the
Martha Gilliland.
Gilliland, yeah.
Oh, that's Martha. Okay.
That's John Richardson next to her.
Yep.
And
He went to
Jan-
Atlanta EPA, right? He was
yeah,
there for a long time.
yeah. And then Jan Zenzimir is the
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who that was.
He stayed in Gainesville for quite a while and worked with what's the guy that
Karen,
did the modeling over in
Karen Lindberg. Karen Lindberg.
yeah, this is Karin. That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, which one's Karen?
Standing.
Glasses.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know that this picture is published anywhere. You can get the names. The other one, I think I must have published it somewhere.
Uh-huh. He had some other newer ones. There's Dr. Odom with some manuals. That's pretty. It must be the 90s, maybe.
Oh, that's when he came to Columbus. This is in Columbus. And what we had was 4 generations of Odomites, including Odum.
There we go. Yeah. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit here.
Athens, Georgia at well, wait a minute, AES meeting.
Oh, that's the George. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't know what happened to my. There we go.
My
So we got
students,
Dr. Odom in the center, and there's his brother, Gene Odom.
yes. And then you got on the left, 1, 2, 3 of my PhD students.
This is Bob Nairn right here, right?
Right.
And then
Hang on,
yeah.
AHM.
And then this person, I don't know.
Oh, he's still an active consultant in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my student.
I was always amazed at how much the brothers looked alike. I remember the first time I met EP, I think it was like an ESA meeting.
You know,
And
this meeting was in the year 2000, I believe.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes. And it's one of the last times the brothers got together.
That's right. They both gave talks there. That was great. That was a great meeting. Let's see if we can go back. My computer screen's not cooperating very well here. What's going on here? We had more. There's Bill giving a talk about Dr. Odom. Looks later.
Is it? I couldn't figure out what that, I didn't know this setting for anything, but you're right. I think I was giving a talk and I think it was in Chicago, but maybe not.
By the grandness of the room, it's either Chicago or Europe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then there's Dr. Odom. That must have been about the 80.
Bill Mitch's home.
Nice.
At a
There he
party.
is.
That's my house too, in Evanston, Illinois.
I remember the suit very well. He saw the suit in 2000. That's great. I think that was it for photos. I really appreciate you sharing those, Bill. I hadn't seen a lot of those. So,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a gigantic collection of Odum pictures. I can look again,
uh-huh.
but I don't know. You can see some stuff in this book. What it is, it's 9.
Yeah, tell us what the book is. So you've written a memoir.
The memoir and
What's
the
the title? What's the title, Bill?
title, the working title was WIFF, What I Fought For. And as we've got up to the end and we had to put a cover on it and put a title on the thing, the publishers, and they were good publishers at CRC, said, Bill, it's getting a little rough out there in the publishing business, and we don't like to use words like fight. Honestly, they told me that. So I said, okay, I'll go to a bland thing, Memoirs of Environmental Science Professor. But we do tell that story in the preface or somewhere. And so
Can you hold up the book to the screen so we can see it? There we go. Memoirs of an Environmental Science Professor. Nice.
Yeah, and it was meant to be a book that young professors especially could see there's hope. And but the message also is you got to work your butt off to make success in the environmental business. So I don't know. I think everybody knows you got to work your butt off. So
what's the take-home message for a new junior professor coming into environmental science field? What do you think? To work hard, to fight.
Yep. And you're going to have disappointments. People, the harder you work, the more disappointments you're going to have, of course, because you're doing more. And so I think that was the second message, that it doesn't come easy. And
was there a strategy on how to deal with the disappointments? Like, how do you think of like one example maybe you had, or you must have had quite a few? Building the wetlands in Columbus must have been quite a struggle. I mean, you finally got it built, but you know.
And then at the very end, when I was so fed up, I decided I was going to look for another job, and I caved into them, and I should have never done that. But you know, I had purchased my house in Florida, the one I'm talking from right now, in Bonita Springs, for a end of a career or a retirement place, and hadn't even thought about teaching. And Robin Lewis, you guys remember him?
I do.
Robin Lewis was a great friend of mine. We taught short courses all over the place in Florida and Ohio every year. And he heard that FGCU had a job offering for a endowed chair. And the endowed chair was funded by the granddaughter of, what's the people that built the highway that went across Florida?
The turnpike that goes from Orlando to Miami.
No, Naples. No, it's before.
The Gator Alley.
Tamiami Trail?
Yes, Tamiami Trail. What is the guy's name? He ended up building it for the state because the state ran out of money in the 1930s or something. His formal name escapes me, but anyhow, that was an important highway, and they made a lot of money, and it was, that it just was something that a lot of people thought was very important. It turns out we got 2 highways that go across the Everglades, so that made it much worse restoring of the Everglades. Those
Yeah,
both of those highways are ruinous to the Everglades. They should have never built either of them.
sure. So, you applied for the endowed chair and got it, evidently.
I well, actually, Robin Lewis got the chair of the search committee to hunt me out.
Okay.
And they came after me, and I said, well, you'll have to do this. And they said, no problem. And in fact, the lady who's the chair of that search committee, I still hear from her all the time on Facebook. And she said, Bill, you were the biggest fish I ever brought out of the water. I said, well, I guess that's a compliment. But you know, they wouldn't say no. So that's why they hired Lee Zhang, my assistant. They provided funding for stuff that I felt was important. And basically, they just gave me the endowed chair to spend on whatever I wanted. So, of course, it funded grad students.
So that's where you created the Everglades,
Research park.
Everglades National Wetland Park.
Yeah, no, look at it. Look at the name. Olentangy River Wetland Research Park. And all I did when I moved to Ohio was scratch out Olentangy River and put Everglades, Florida Everglades. So
So the Everglades Research Park.
yeah, the research park would put that in there too. Even though I didn't know that I had a research park. But we were based at the Naples Botanical Garden. And that was a wonderful setting. So, you know, not because I'm a botanist, but because it was just perfect to be away from the department far enough that they're not going to. And we ran the best. We invented the Moonlight on the March lecture, and guess who the first lecturer was?
H.T. Odum.
The Odum. Were any of you guys there?
No,
No.
Gave the
that was
first,
in the 90s, right?
yeah, 95. That's when he got an honorary degree from the Ohio State University. So we decided to have an outdoor seminar, and we figured the perfect person is number one is H.T. Odum, and he enjoyed it. It was, and we had no building, we had no nothing, no formal research lab or anything. All we had was the 2 kidney wetlands, and we found 4 poles and put a tarp on them in case it rained, and we gave HT a slide projector or no, you know, overhead projector slide shower.
Yeah.
What are they called?
Yeah, overhead projector.
Yeah.
With transparencies.
Oh, the transfers were just flying off the top of that. It was classic Odum. So
Well, he dropped did he drop the transparencies before he started the talk or during the talk?
of course.
Seems to be a common theme we're hearing.
And it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter what order you get them picked up.
So it seems like it was intentional, as often as it
It was,
happened.
you know, I think it was because he had a hard time organizing his thoughts into a coherent hour lecture. He would just mix it all up, and then he could use that as an excuse and say, well, I just dropped my transparency, so bear with me for not really.
You're right.
He was actually very organized. He could be very coherent, but there was many times when he did drop those
Yeah,
transparencies.
you guys have to have a subtitle with this if you do a book. And drop transparencies is a good title.
But I remember, you know, I was a student at Florida when you got him the honorary degree, and I remember him coming back and talking about it. You know, he was so impressed that he had gotten it, and I remember him remarking about how there was all the universities. There's this or convergence of how universities operate and what they kind of treat as important, because it seemed like all the commencements are identical. You know, they all do the same kind of thing, and
After he came to Columbus.
yeah. He's making observations about these bigger scale issues about how we had this convergence of information and knowledge, and this was one of his data points. But
That's cool. No,
yeah,
we got him, and I made a point of getting him an honorary degree at Ohio State before his brother, but we did give one to his brother, and that one was amazing because there was that was the semester end or the fall. No, sorry, the spring. What's the big one called?
spring commencement's a big one.
Yeah, and and we had a thunderous rainstorm, and Gene Odum. They never gave Gene Odum his degree,
Oh, really?
and they forgot that they didn't give Gene Odum his degree. I had to finally say, guys, hand Gene Odum his degree, and they said, no. I said, well, we better invite him back. So he came back a second time, and he got
Wow.
two visits out of that.
What was your relationship with Gene Odom? Did you ever get to work with him, or how'd you guys
No, no, no.
collaborate? You met, or
It was just, the fact that I studied under his brother, that was enough to make it easy.
did you ever use the Fundamentals of Ecology textbook in your classes?
I think I did once or twice, yes. But usually I'm using, modeling books and wetland books.
Mhm.
But anyhow, yeah, that was a 1975. So we had the Moonlight on the Marsh lecture series start in Ohio. And then when I moved down to FGCU, we continued them mostly in the same idea at a wetland called Freedom Park. But we had some other sites too around South Florida for those. So I did the same thing with those that I did in Ohio. I put a plaque on the wall and put the name of the speaker and blah, blah, blah. And I think we've maybe completed 30 talks in Florida and 30 and maybe 29 in Ohio. Amazingly similar number.
It's amazing. Great. So
So
when you
there's-
look back, go ahead, Mark.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, when you look back over your career, you wrote the Wetlands book, all about the ecology of wetlands. You've done a lot of stuff with ecological engineering. What's your kind of message, your kind of take-home message for the people coming into the field these days in wetlands or in ecological engineering?
You mean on the subject or on the succeeding in your
Yeah,
career?
what's kind of the state of wetlands and wetland science and the ecological engineering? Things looking good. What do we need to be doing better?
Well, and it's getting worse. If I wrote this book now, I would really be concerned because wetlands are taking it a hammer throw on their head. It's, with the Supreme Court decision and all this kind of stuff. I had a chapter in this book that I thought if this book has 9 chapters, and there's one chapter, I'll get the title. Can you read it?
Wetlands, using wetland science to support federal protection of wetlands as waters of the United States.
Now that's hit the fan again. This was 25 years ago. And, right now, if you follow the Supreme Court stuff, wetlands have been redefined by Supreme Court justices who, of course, got degrees in wetlands. So I had to tell the story of how we saved the day in, let's see, what years? In 1987, 89, 91, in the early 90s, in other words. And we were very proud of ourselves. So I put even a copy of the cover of a report that we did of the National Academy of Science. And everybody swears, Bill, you wrote that book, right? No, but they have wetlands right on the top. And this went to the National Academy of Science or NRC or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And we saved the day. It was there's a story in there where just before they were going to push the button in the Congress, I think it was one of the Kennedys stood up in the House of Representatives and said, I have just received the National Academy's draft proposal, and we should not write a definition of wetlands in the House. And then the Senate agreed too. So we saved a bazillion acres of wetlands, we thought. But here, what you don't know is that it will cycle back. And so here in 2020 or whenever it was, after Trump became president, there was another wetland thing. Anyhow,
Right, so yeah, so isolated wetlands are no longer considered
right.
waters of the state, right?
And whereas before there was always a way to fix the problem, now it's draconian. It's going to be very hard to even talk about wetlands and waters. It's in a way it's a very artificial way of defining wetlands to call them waters of the United States. That was for the convenience of EPA and so on. So we've done well in using the idea for 40 years, but I think it's done. So we have to come up with some other way of saving wetlands and not just giving them a formal name like WOTUS.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
I think that's just, yeah, in general, the political system it's in disarray, but it's also less, I think, less powerful in some ways than it used to be.
Right.
It gets co-opted by special interest even more.
And it's funny because when you see some of the states have taken over the worrying about the wetland definitions of giving permits, I should say it that way. Some of the states have done that for very noble reasons. There were good people with good science, and they just wanted to save the wetlands in their state. More promising in Florida?
No, not at all. The whole reason for waters of the state or waters of the nation is how can the federal government or the state government actually get the authority to regulate something? And it has to come from the fact that they have regulatory power over the water due to the Navigation Act and other things. So they had to give wetlands the term waters of the country or waters of the state in order for them to be able to regulate and have the authority to regulate.
Right. It's gotta be interstate, intrastate, or whatever terms. And
Lots
that
of
but and
anyway,
for
so I'm wondering, Bill, can you remember any salient interactions with HT that just blew your mind and really changed the way you thought or set the tone for the way you think for the rest of your life? Is there any? I mean, it's hard for us. I have a really hard time trying to think of those.
I'm struggling with your question right now. I got to give it some thought, but there were occasions when you just have a discussion with him at a party or something, and he tell you something, and you say, "Holy shit!"
Right.
No,
Yeah, it's hard to remember them now. It's just been too long, but
yeah,
there was at least one a week, or more that just changed the way the way you thought. I think the thing that I remember most, if I were just to do a generalization, is that no matter what you said about something, oh, that's terrible, but it shouldn't happen, it shouldn't be that way. Odum would always sit there and say, well, there must be a reason. Let's try to understand why it's there, and why it's why it's happening that way. From the larger perspective, from the system's perspective, there's no such thing as bad necessarily. It's all about it's there. It has some function, and can we understand it better that way?
Oh, that's a beautiful way to say it, and it's true. if waters of the United States is an incomplete definition, so be it. And why do you have to have a word?
Yeah.
Say wetland values or
Yeah.
wetland. You know, we don't need to call them waters of the United States. That's an artificial requirement. Yeah,
Okay.
in a way, you're right. That's what Odum brought to the table.
It was,
And the more we get into issues that we're personally involved with and trying to use artificial definitions, the more we're going to find disappointment.
yeah.
And that's okay. But, you know, the lawyers need their words, need their terminologies. And so unfortunate that lawyers are involved in this stuff because they know nothing about wetlands. That's what gets me. If they're talking about a definition of the waters of the United States, all these legal people have no business being involved unless they know waters of the United States or unless they know wetlands. And it's a fruitless chase also. But I think you're right. Odum was okay with whatever happened.
Well, it wasn't so not necessarily okay, but his first reaction is always, well, let's try to understand why it's there, whatever it is,
Yeah.
rather than just dismiss and say, oh, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that or that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
If it's there, it had a function and has a function. It may not last forever, but at the moment it has a function. And what is that function?
Yeah. Because when we wrote the chapter in here, I showed you the chapter title, and we were very proud that 20 scientists involved in the National Academy of Science had really, we thought, won the battle.
Yeah.
But at the end of that chapter, I had to say, well, 20 years later, it happened again. And that was 1995. What would last year be?
It'd be 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Less than 30.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it happened again, and I had to add a little paragraph at the end of that chapter.
Well, Bill, I think we're coming up on close to maybe our time, hour and a half or so here.
Okay.
I think one of the final questions we like to ask is if Dr. Odum were sitting next to you right now, is there a question that you have burning on your mind that you would like to ask him? Might be a tough one to think about.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on some of the things we've discussed here. But that's a tough question.
Give you something to think about then.
Yeah. If I think of something, I'll send you an email.
Okay. Well, we can
Well,
always put you back on again.
I mean, he was an absolutely wonderful advisor. He, as busy as he was great. And so I used him as a model of what a professor should do with students, especially graduate students.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it was teaching undergrads, but teaching being his graduate student was just an awesome responsibility. And I'm very proud that I did that. You can see how I had to zigzag through society to find the right mix. And it all worked out in the end.
What do you think was his key way he operated with his graduate students? Like what was like really kind of stands out in your mind about how he operated?
Well, I think because of how busy he was going traveling, giving talks and so on at his peak, and that was the same case with me. You had to tell the students, relax, I'll be there sometime. When did you schedule your defense? But he was always there in the end. And
Yeah, I'm sure he could always contribute at the drop of a hat,
Yeah.
anytime.
And contribution from him is worth 20 on the other professors.
That's great. Well, it's really nice for you to have joined us today. Really
Oh,
appreciate
yeah,
your
thanks.
time and enjoyed it.
So this is
Really,
gonna, what format? It's gonna be just what we did?
yeah, we'll do a little bit of editing, maybe cut out some of the couple pieces here and there, but pretty minor on the editing. And then we store it on a YouTube channel, and then that YouTube is then we have it listed on the Emergy Society's website, and then also the Ecological Engineering, the American Ecological Engineering Society, has agreed to to have a link to it.
I didn't know there was an Emergy. Is it a journal?
We don't have a journal. We have a society. It's called the International Society for the Advancement of Emergy Research that me and Mark and Dan Campbell and a few others have been instrumental in keeping that going over the years.
We have still have editors that call that a misspelling.
No, not so much anymore. I think we finally have gotten the mainstream on that anyway. I don't know. There's still a lot of people that don't buy the whole concept, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that call it something else, but they're thinking Emergy, so I see it
yeah.
all the time in different forums. But
No, you guys are still out there fighting.
well, we have Mark host the Emergy meeting. It's going to be in January, right? Listen to me, 95, 2020, 2025.
Right. January of 2025. Here in Gainesville.
2025.
We've been doing them for 22 years, 24 years now, I guess.
I think was the first one 99 or 2000?
2000.
Yeah, 2000.
The first one was also in
They've all been in Gainesville.
all been there.
Yeah. Every time we say we're going to move it, there's all these people go, oh no, don't move it, don't move it. They want to come home. They feel like Gainesville is
Oh
home.
yeah, in a way that makes some sense, but it's like coming to a holy place.
Right. Ramadan.
They love it. All the foreign Emergy scientists love to come to Gainesville, I know.
Yeah.
It's great. It's pretty nice for Mark and his wife to host
I think it's
everybody
fun.
too.
Keep it there.
Yeah. So you're close by, so maybe you can make it up to Gainesville January.
Oh, my days of traveling to meetings are over. There's a lot of Parkinson's something, and I don't know what it is, and I just can't travel like I used to.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, Bill, thank you. This has been really a pleasure and enjoyed it very, very much.
Yeah, no, this was a learning experience for me too, what I didn't know.
I think you'll really enjoy it. We've done Charlie Hall and John Day and Ariel and Walter Boynton, and we just talked to Suzanne Bailey. So we can share all those with you. If you want to go back and watch them yourself, you can do that.
Sure. Are they online?
Yeah, we'll share the links with you. Pat Kangas did our first one, so we've and
Pat's still active, or did he retire?
Pat is right. He's active. He just finished a book on radio ecology where he looked at the history of radio ecology and the Odum's role in that. He published that maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then he's working on a book on he's reading the letters that the Odum brothers wrote to each other over their lifetime. And he's going to publish some type of book on that hopefully soon. So
I thought we said he was retired.
He's retired from teaching, yeah, but he's still very active.
Yeah.
That's why he's at the Xerox machine. It's all material for his books.
Yep.
By the way, I remember the name of the guy that on the side of that picture that went to South Florida Water Management District. It was Tom Fontaine.
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 I know that name.
Yeah.
Yep. He was a champion of the Everglades. What he could.
Yeah.
And he got, just royal trouble with those agency people.
Yeah, he was a good modeler. He was a very good modeler.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
guys.
Bill. Take care.
Yeah.
And let me know when you have a draft or whatever you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Great. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.